Army Brats, and we're on chapter 18, so we're getting there. I want mint chocolate chip, Rosie said on Friday afternoon as she stared into the big cooler at the colorful array of ice cream flavors on offer. Or maybe cookie dough, ooh, or strawberry fudge. It turned out the Fort Patrick ice cream shop was one of the best Rosie had ever seen, and it was very hard to choose. Whatever you want, Rosie Posey, Dad said, agreeably. He was licking his cone of salted caramel and did not seem in a rush to get to the PX, their next stop before returning home for dinner. Her siblings were waiting right outside the store. Charlotte had gotten her usual Heath butter crunch, and Tom had ordered boring plain chocolate. Though Rosie noticed he wasn't actually eating it. His cheeks were pale, and he barely glanced at Cupcake, bouncing happily between him and Charlotte, hoping for a bite of the cone. Dad had not wanted to bring Cupcake on the outing, but of course Rosie had insisted. With a dog napper loose, the base was not safe for Cupcake, and Rosie had no intention of leaving her unguarded, not for 1 second. Well, except when she had to go to school, but Dad had been looking after Cupcake then. I think I'll have confetti, Rosie finally decided. The most colorful ice cream was probably going to be the best. The woman behind the counter nodded, then plopped a big scoop of the pink, blue, yellow, and purple ice cream on top of a sugar cone and handed it to Rosie. Rosie took a big lick and was rewarded with a sugary sweet explosion. Good? Dad asked as he handed over money. Affirmative, Rosie said, then licked around the edge of the cone to prevent drips. Dad led the way out into the steamy afternoon. Rosie loved the feel of the hot sun on her face while she licked the deliciously cold ice cream. The Baileys headed for the PX, walking slowly past the movie theater where people were starting to line up for the late afternoon show. Hi, guys. Rosie turned and saw Tash had come up. Are you going to see the movie? Charlotte asked. Tash nodded. My mom is really into movies, so we come almost every week, she said. Have you guys been yet? Couples and families ambled past, some heading to the ice cream parlor, which now had a line out the door, and others toward the pizza place across the street. Not yet, Charlotte said. We've been kind of busy, but hopefully soon. Her words were nice, but Rosie could tell that her sister was worried by the way she was biting at her lip instead of eating her ice cream. Even worse was Tom, who had just dumped his uneaten cone in the trash when Dad wasn't looking. Tash nodded. Before they start the previews, everyone stands up for the Star-Spangled Banner, like at a baseball game. Do you put your hand on your heart like for retreat? Rosie asked. Tash nodded and smiled in a friendly way Rosie liked. Sure do, she said. Maybe sometime you can come over to our house, Rosie said, certain that this would help cheer up Charlotte at least a little. We have a really good dollhouse. Charlotte gave a strangled cough as Tasha's eyes lit up. I love dolls, she said. You can come over any time, Rosie said, except not now because we're going to the PX, and not this weekend because we have an important secret mission, but after that. The corners of Tasha's eyes crinkled as she smiled. Okay, maybe after that, she said, then headed back to her mom. Let's go, troops, Dad called. He had finished his cone and now seemed eager to tackle their next errand of getting new rain boots, rain boots for everyone. As they headed down Patrick Boulevard, Cupcake danced at Rosie's heels, looking up longingly at her ice cream. Remember, sugar isn't good for you. Good for her, Dad said. He knew it was hard for Rosie to resist when Cupcake begged. When they arrived at the PX, Rosie realized they could not take Cupcake into the store, but luckily there were some neighbors, including Mrs. Dunbar, holding a small bake sale out front, and they agreed to keep an eye on Cupcake while the Baileys shopped. Wasn't that nice? It's good to have good neighbors, isn't it? Make sure you don't take your eyes off her, Rosie said. Miss Dunbar nodded seriously. Don't worry, I won't, she promised. Then she glanced at Dad. Good luck in there. It takes a brave person to try and shop at the PX on payday. Dad rubbed his head for a moment. Oh, I'd forgotten it was payday, he said. Rosie didn't understand why Dad looked so worried. But once they'd walked through the doors of the huge box store, she got it. It turned out that payday made everyone on post run to the PX as fast as possible. The aisles were jammed with people and carts. Kids were running wild, and register lines seemed to stretch on forever. After giving up on getting a cart through the crowd, Dad sent Charlotte and Tom to get their boots farther down the aisle while he helped Rosie, but unfortunately the only pair in her size was not right. I don't like the blue boots, Rosie said. I definitely want pink. But, sweetie, these are the only ones that will fit you, Dad said, pressing his forehead the way he did when he had a headache. All the voices around them were kind of loud. Rosie was about to tell him to take an aspirin, which was what Mom said to do when he had a headache, but then someone next to them dropped some flowered rain boots on Dad's foot. And Dad was busy saying it didn't hurt at all, even though Rosie could tell by the way Dad was limping that it did. Maybe we could get the blue boots this time and pink when your feet grow, Dad said, hopefully when the boot droppers had moved on. He looked like his headache was getting worse, and Rosie wanted to help, but there was no way she would ever wear mold blue boots. How about we wait and come later for pink boots, Rosie said. Please, she had found a good solution. We can come next week. I don't know if I can face coming here again in this lifetime, let alone next week, Dad muttered, as a woman pushing a baby stroller nearly plowed them down. Just then, 3 boys knocked over the umbrella display, and Dad went to help. Did you get your boots, Rosie? Charlotte asked, coming up with a pair of purple boots in her hand. No, they don't have the right ones, Rosie said. Where's Dad? Tom asked as he walked over with boots that were army green. Rosie was about to tell him when her brother's eyes suddenly got wide and the green boots slid out of his hand. It's him, Tom whispered urgently, staring at the aisle behind them. At first, all Rosie could see was a family with 4 arguing brothers, but then she too saw him, the man from the house. He was wearing the same brown coat and slipping effortlessly through the crowd, unnoticed by everyone except the Baileys. Charlotte drew in a deep breath. If we follow him, we might be able to find out what he's really up to and get it on video. Good thinking, Tom said, taking off after the man. Just don't let him see you. Rosie flew after him, Charlotte on her heels, though the crowd made it tough to move fast. Charlotte kept whacking people in the knees with her purple boots and having to apologize while Tom kept stepping on other shoppers. Rosie was the first to reach the end of the aisle, and she craned her neck, trying to see where the man had gone. Unfortunately, everyone around her was tall and very in the way. He's headed into lawn and garden supplies, Tom said, as he came up slightly breathless. Don't let him get away, Charlotte hissed as they took off. The man did not stop to look at garden tools or grass seed. He just darted past families and lone soldiers picking up supplies. Before they could follow, the Baileys were cut off by a rogue shopping cart full of cat litter. We're going to lose him, Tom cried, but Rosie was able to inch past and keep the man in her sights as he nearly sprinted for the automotive section at the very back of the store near the rear exit. He was probably going to buy engine parts to build an escape vehicle to take the dogs, including Buddy, away forever. Rosie could not let that happen. She sped up and was closing in on the man when suddenly a security guard reached out and grabbed Rosie's arm. I can't let you outside without an adult, little miss, the guard said. Her voice was kind, but Rosie was no little miss, and the man in the brown was getting away. He was already out the automatic doors, and once he made it into the parking lot, he would be lost for good, ruining their chance to save the dogs. So Rosie did the only thing she could think of. She yelled. There were a lot of things she could have said, and later that night Rosie thought of all of them. But in the moment, what escaped her lips was IED! And as it turned out, when even someone who was only 6 shouted about an improvised explosive device in a store full of army folk, the result was pure chaos. People screamed and ran and ducked for cover, and the security guard, in what she believed was a show of valor, threw herself on top of Rosie. The last thing Rosie saw before being buried under the guard's polyester uniform was the man in brown heading out into the sunset. Later, after Dad had apologized to the store manager for the millionth time, and the Baileys had left the PX in disgrace, Rosie overheard her brother and sister. I wish we'd been able to follow him, Tom said, his voice wistful. Who knows what we might have found? I know, Charlotte said. We'll just have to make sure we get inside the house and get that video tomorrow. Yeah, Tom said heavily. Her siblings thought Rosie had blown it, and Rosie knew it was true. She'd picked the worst time ever to finally get a military term right, and as they drove home, Rosie blinked back tears. She wanted to save the dogs and help her brother, but instead she had messed everything up. Poor Rosie. Okay, that's the end of the chapter, and I'll see you shortly for chapter 19. Happy reading!